Greetings, Internet. I'm Jeff477, and welcome back to Movie Talk. If you're a film buff, or ever decide to take a career in filmmaking, then there's a good chance you've seen at least one of the many films directed by the master of suspense himself, Sir Alfred Hitchcock. And I do mean many films. Hitchcock's career spanned from the final decade of the silent era of filmmaking through the 70s, directing over 50 films within that time frame. The only thing that would prevent him from making more movies was his declining health and his eventual death in 1980. Hitchcock also helped pioneer new camera techniques as well as lighting techniques that would help get the shots that he wanted to put onto the screen. Even though Hitchcock had his own unique style of filmmaking, he wasn't afraid to branch out and try new things, including other film genres. I've been a fan of Hitchcock's work since my college days, and I've made a habit to try to watch as many Hitchcock films as I possibly can. And today, we're going to be taking a look at my top 10 favorite Hitchcock films. Keep in mind that there are going to be some Hitchcock films that are not going to make it onto this list. And there are two reasons for it. One, I haven't seen the movie. Or two, I just didn't enjoy the film as much as I do the other ones. So, I'm sorry to say this, but Vertigo will not be on this list. Also, I'll try my best to keep this list as spoiler-free as possible. I really want you guys to check out these films. I really do. With all that said, let's get started. Number 10, Shadow of a Doubt. This movie was said to be one of Hitchcock's favorite films that he had ever made. And it's not hard to see why, given its concept of a potential evil coming into a small little quiet town. The movie centers around a young lady named Charlie, played by actress Teresa Wright, and her family as her uncle, who is also named Charlie, comes to visit. All seems to be going well until two detectives show up and explain to Charlie that her uncle is suspected to be the Merry Widow murderer. Naturally, Charlie doesn't believe them. But as time goes by, there is a shadow of doubt in her mind that continues to grow and fester as the film progresses. This film comes at the low end of people's top 10 lists, which it's not hard to understand why. It's not as memorable as some of other films in Hitchcock's work, but it's still a good film to watch, and I do recommend that you check it out when you get the chance. Hi there. A quick little word before we get to the rest of the video. While working on this video, I recently found out that Shadow of Doubt may have had a lot more love than I thought it did. Because I found out that in 1991, there was a TV remake of the film starring NCIS's Mark Harmon. I couldn't believe it either. Number 9, Frenzy. Based on the book by Arthur La Berne, the movie focuses on a string of murders that wreak havoc in the city of London. As per usual in a Hitchcock film, the police suspect an innocent man of the crimes after his ex-wife becomes the latest victim. Unlike other Hitchcock films, our lead, Richard Blaney, played by John Finch, doesn't go out to try to prove his innocence and find the real murderer. He's more of a get out of town and hide away from the police kind of person. Meanwhile, the real killer sets his sights on his next victim. This film was Hitchcock's penultimate film. Many saw it as Hitchcock's return from grace after a couple of unsuccessful films. It was well received by both critics and audiences, and many believe that Hitchcock should have retired after this film's success. Of course, anyone who is familiar with Hitchcock's work knows that didn't happen. I think what helped with the film's success was that Hitchcock had a lot more freedom to put what he wanted onto the silver screen, due to the Hays Code being replaced with the MMPA rating system. And because of this newfound freedom, Frenzy was the first of Hitchcock's films to get an R rating, much like with Shadow of a Doubt. Frenzy isn't one of those films that people think of when you bring up Alfred Hitchcock. Hell, it barely makes people's top 10 lists. It's a great film, finding the right balance between scenes so disturbing that it even disturbed the actors who brought those scenes to life, with some comedic scenes that have a kind of a darker edge to them. If it's Halloween season and you're looking for a new thriller to watch, I do highly recommend you check out Frenzy. It will not disappoint you.
How'd you like my tie?
Number 8. Notorious. This 1946 thriller, which stars Cary Grant, Ingrid Bergman, and Claude Rains, centers around a love triangle that forms between the characters these three legendary actors play as during an espionage operation that involves a Nazi group hiding out in South America. This film was the first Alfred Hitchcock film that I had ever seen in my life, and I enjoyed it very much. There are a lot of great things about this movie, from the camera work that makes you wonder how they were able to pull that off in the 1940s, to the storytelling and how it is told in frame. Who knew you can make people drinking champagne feel like a ticking time bomb? Out of all the Hitchcock films that I have seen, Notorious is the most romantic of them all. You can tell that the characters that Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman play, Devlin and Alicia, are really in love with each other, whether they want to admit it or not, and the situation that they are put in. And you do feel bad for Claude Rains' Sebastian when he finds out the truth about Alicia, almost forgetting the fact that he's working with a bunch of Nazis. When people place this movie on their top 10 list, they usually put it at the low end of the list, but don't let that discourage you. You should really see this film. Besides, if the people who made Star Wars: The Clone Wars were willing to adapt this movie into an episode, Notorious must be doing something right.
You can add Sebastian's name to my list of playmates.
Number 7. Strangers on a Train. Based on the novel by Patricia Highsmith, the movie focuses on two strangers who meet on a train. One of the strangers, Bruno Anthony, played by Robert Walker. I don't think there's a relation. Who comes up with the unique idea to commit the perfect murder? His idea?
They swap murders.
Swap murders.
Each fellow does the other fellow's murder.
As you could probably guess, Bruno isn't right in the head. So much so that Bruno kills the estranged wife of our other stranger, Guy Haynes, played by Verley Granger, and expects Haynes to fulfill his end of a murder swap that he never agreed to. This film was the second Hitchcock film that I had ever seen, and I enjoyed it so much that I went through a bunch of stores that sold DVDs just to get my hands on a copy. One interesting thing about this film is that there is another version of this movie called the British version. Despite its name, the British version was just an early preview cut of Strangers on a Train, with a couple of scenes changed or weren't in the final version of the film. Now, you don't have to go through a deep dive on the web to find this version of the film, as it is included in most DVD and Blu-ray releases. Strangers on a Train is one of Hitchcock's most recognizable films. Its themes of swapping murders has inspired many movies and TV shows, ranging from an episode of Castle to the dark comedy Throw Mama from the Train. If you want to get into Hitchcock, this will be a great movie to start off with.
Is your name Miriam?
Number 6. Dial M for Murder. Based on the play by Frederick Nutt, Dial M for Murder tells the story of Tony Wendes, played by Ray Milland, who hires a former college mate to murder his wife Margot, played by Grace Kelly. Why does Tony want to kill his wife? The answer is simple. Margot cheated on him with an American writer named Mark Halliday, played by Robert Cummings. Tony has planned this elaborate murder, complete with an alibi for himself and having the crime scene staged to look like a robbery gone wrong once the murder has been committed. But like with all things in life, things don't go as planned. One of the highlights of this film is the cast. Almost everyone is likable, especially Tony Wendes. He has such a charming personality that you almost want him to succeed in his wrongdoings. Almost. One of the interesting things to note about Dial M for Murder was that it was originally supposed to be a 3D movie. And you can tell that with a couple of shots in the film. But due to people stay away from the film's 3D preview, Warner Bros. Decided to release the 2D version, which helped end the 3D phase of the 1950s. But the story doesn't end there. In 1982, when 3D was still all the rage, again, Warner Bros. Decided to do a limited re-release of Dial M for Murder in its 3D form. And it was successful. Even to this day, there is a 3D Blu-ray version of the film available to watch. Now, while I haven't seen the 3D version of Dial M for Murder, I doubt it's going to change how I feel about this movie. I find the film very enjoyable to watch, and it's one of my 4 go-to films to watch whenever I feel like watching Hitchcock.
When she heard that, we'd have the biggest laugh of our lives.
Number 5. Rope. Based on the play by Patrick Hamilton, the movie centers around 2 men, played by John Dole and Furley Granger, murdering one of their friends just for the thrill of it. After the murder, they throw a dinner party with the victim's family, friends, girlfriend, and former teacher, played by James Stewart, in the same room where they hid the body. Talk about mess the fuck up! One of the unique things about Rope that sets it apart from other Hitchcock films is that Hitchcock tried to shoot this as one continuous shot, a feat that had never been done before, at least to my recollection, and would take the creation of digital technology to help get right. Another thing I should note is that the screenwriter for the film, Arthur Lawrence, wasn't fond of the fact that the murder that kicks off the story was shot and shown on screen. He believed that the suspense of the film came from the audience determining whether or not there was a dead body in the chest. I personally find Mr. Lennox's statements goes against how Hitchcock did suspense. Hitchcock believed that a scene becomes more suspenseful if the audience has more information than the characters do. In Rope, most of the cast doesn't know there is a body of someone they know and love hidden away in a chest right under their nose. But we, the audience, know that there is a body. And you are on the edge of your seats waiting for someone to open that chest to discover that body and praying like hell that the victim's father isn't there when it does. I'll be the first to admit that when I first watched this movie, I didn't enjoy it that much. That was mostly due to the fact that I was using the film as a set design assignment. But upon further viewings, Rope has grown on me. It's one of those films that I actually wouldn't mind seeing get remade. Hear me out. I know it sounds like I'm speaking blasphemy, but with today's film technology and movies like 1917, it is possible to make Rope in the way that Hitchcock had originally envisioned. Instead of just zooming in on purpose back to hide the cut. Now, would people go for it? I don't know. But whether it happens or not, Rope is still a good film to watch.
Go ahead and look. I hope you like what you see.
Number 4, To Catch a Thief. Based on the novel by David Dodge, To Catch a Thief centers around a string of jewel thefts that is plaguing the French Riviera. The police suspect former jewel thief John Roby, the Cat, played by Cary Grant, of the crimes. Roby decides to find out who is behind the thefts himself, as the thief is using the same techniques that he used. Along the way, Roby meets Frances Stevens, played by Grace Kelly, and ends up falling in love with her, as the new thief comes closer and closer to his or her next target. When To Catch a Thief was released in theaters, it garnered some mixed reviews by critics. While they praised the performances of Cary Grant and Grace Kelly, and having the film set in the French Riviera, they felt that the film lacked the suspense from Hitchcock's earlier works. But was it supposed to be suspenseful? With the way the film is edited together and the choice in music, it seems to me that To Catch a Thief was meant to be more of a comedic mystery romance movie than a suspense thriller. I think critics of the time were expecting it to be suspenseful due to the fact that Hitchcock was also producing and directing the film. Fun fact, around the time To Catch a Thief was being filmed, Cary Grant was actually planning on retiring from acting. After working on the film, he changed his mind and would continue at until 1966. Also, To Catch a Thief would be the last time Grace Kelly would star in one of Hitchcock's films. A year after the film's release, Grace Kelly would retire from acting and marry Rainer III, Prince of Monte Carlo. As far as I'm concerned, To Catch a Thief is a great film to go out on.
Haven't got a decent watch.
Steal one.
Number 3, Psycho. This is one of Hitchcock's most recognizable films, and one of my staples to watch during the Halloween season. The film follows Marion Crane, played by Janet Leigh, who steals thousands of dollars to help out her boyfriend that she wants to marry. But as time goes by, Marion starts having second thoughts about her actions. Before she can act to make things right, Marion is murdered in the famous shower scene. And I think I'll stop describing the plot from there. I encourage you to watch this film to see all the twists and turns it has to offer, even if you already know them already. Speaking of twists and turns, Hitchcock went to some extreme lengths in order to ensure that the ending for Psycho did not get spoiled. During the pre-production of the film, he had the studio buy up every single copy of the novel that Psycho was based on, and then after the movie was released in theaters, he had it so that every theater would not admit people into seats after Psycho started playing. I will admit that I was hesitant to watch this film. You have to understand, I grew up not watching a lot of horror movies. Hell, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island scared the hell out of me. And still kind of does. But curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check this film out. And I'm glad I did. This film is Hitchcock at his best, and many, including myself, consider it to be one of his best works. And you definitely should check it out when you get the time. And yes, I have seen the 1998 remake. Just do yourself a favor and watch the original. Number 2, North by Northwest. Another film that many people, including the movie screenplay writer, consider to be Hitchcock at his best. North by Northwest is a story about Roger Thornhill, played by Cary Grant, who is mistaken to be a government agent by an espionage group. There is just one hiccup. The agent that Thornhill is mistaken to be doesn't exist. And I'll stop right there and allow you to figure out what happens next. Trust me when I say you will not be disappointed. This movie has almost everything you could want in a film. Action, suspense, romance, comedy, all blended together in a neat package. It also happens to be the most adventurous of Hitchcock's films. In many of Hitchcock's films, the movies take place in one or two locations. This movie takes you everywhere from New York City to the heartland of America. The cast is just fantastic in this movie. Even those actors and actresses who appear for like one scene are a delight to watch.
Stop!
Oh, excuse me.
Stop.
Also, in my opinion, this movie has Cary Grant's best performance. At least from all the films that I have seen him in. It also happens to be the last time Cary Grant would star in one of Hitchcock films. Eva Marie Saint stars opposite of Cary, and she gives a performance that is on par with Cary's. She has this air of femme fatale about her when you first meet her, but as the film goes on, we see that there is more to her than it seems. This movie always takes one of the top 5 spots when somebody decides to do a top 10 list of Hitchcock's films. And North by Northwest deserves that recognition. Now, you might be wondering why I'm praising this film so much, even though it's at the number 2 spot. Well, that's because there's one film that I enjoy more. And my number 1 favorite Alfred Hitchcock film is Rear Window. Based on the short story called It Had to Be Murder by Cornell Woolrich, Rear Window centers on a photographer named L.B. Jeffries, played by James Stewart, who spends his time watching his neighbors as his leg heals from a work accident. As time goes by, he suspects that one of his neighbors, played by Perry Mason actor Raymond Burr, may have murdered his wife. Some of you may have heard of a plot similar to this. Well, that's because this film has been retold time and time again. These retellings include, but aren't limited to, an episode of The Simpsons, the 100th episode of Castle, a TV remake starring Superman actor Christopher Reeves, and a modern retelling that I haven't seen yet. The cast of Rear Window is fantastic, from the main actors to the smallest role. After having not seen the film for quite some time, I still remember a lot of the smaller roles, from Miss Torso dancing in her apartment, to the newlyweds that spend most of the film consummating their marriage, to poor Miss Lonely Heart. Oh, and we cannot forget Jeffrey's nurse, Stella, played by Thelma Ritter. In my opinion, she is one of the best supporting characters in the film.
Once it was see somebody, get excited, get married.
James Stewart is also great in this movie. It's one of his best performances outside of George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life. Then there's Grace Kelly, who stars opposite James Stewart, and she is fantastic as always. And you can really tell that her character, Lisa Fremont, really cares and loves Jeffries. But Jeffries has come under the impression that the relationship isn't going to end happily ever after. But that way of thinking changes as the film goes on. Then there's the way that the film's story is being told. For the majority of the film, we are seeing things as Jeffries sees them. There are only a couple of times where Hitchcock gives us more information than Jeffries knows, which adds more to the burning question. Was there a murder? Well, you'll have to check out this number 1 Alfred Hitchcock film to find out.
And what you think it means.
And those are my top 10 favorite Alfred Hitchcock films. What do you think of this list? Is there an Alfred Hitchcock film that you feel is better than these? Well, let me know in the comment section below. Until next time, I'm Jeff477, signing off.